There is a fair bit of violence in the film, but to be honest, it's mostly shot in very dark and murky visuals, so you can't always see exactly what's going on. In fact, at times it's quite confusing. You get the impression that these fight scenes are taking place because there's people running everywhere, and the choppy editing indicates that there's battle happening, but you can't always see exactly what's taking place. And part of that is that you don't get to see a lot of injury detail or wounding, so this helps, I guess, keep the rating down for the movie. So to give you some idea of the kind of violence, in these battle and fight sequences, there's weapons being brandished. So there's one particular man who carries a sword, sometimes it's a flaming sword. So you see people being run through and stabbed and kind of, attacked with the sword. You see other objects as well, like a large kind of baton and small blades. In fact, at one scene, you see the blade being pushed through someone's hand and protruding from the other side. The object is then removed and the wound self-heals. So it's that kind of thing that happens through the film. And even though it's fairly kind of heavy when it happens, it's not actually a lot of it in the film. It's really only one or two or three kind of fight sequences. And, most of them are fairly short-lived. I guess where the camera focuses a little bit on the violence, on a scene of violence, is a few people are throat grabbed. One person in particular is held down and grabbed around the neck and near choked. And that's probably the most, lengthy scene of where somebody is under attack. But people are, elbowed and headbutted and, handcuffed and punched and kicked and things like that. But again, as I said, it's, a bit hard to get across what I guess I'm trying to say, but they're sort of short-lived. It kind of happens and moved on. They certainly don't linger on any of the injury detail. But that's not to say that you don't see blood in the film. There's a little bit of blood. You do see some bloody bullet wounds where people are shot. You see one man is thrown through the air and he ends up being impaled on a post which is sticking out. He does survive. But you do see, you see the object protruding from his chest, and you get the impression that, there's blood and gore associated with that. You see a man with a bloody eye, and you see some bloody hands and fingers, and also a bloody thumbprint smeared across a page. So it's that kind of idea. You also see corpses. You see people lying dead, after they've been attacked. You also see a man lying in a coffin. And you see corpses or people which have died and then been burned. So you see the corpses kind of in the position where they fell, and then the charred sort of, very blackened remains of these bodies. Now, there's obviously witches in the film, and they come across as very kind of, the ugliness is in the detail of the flesh. So their skin, when they're not using immortality kind of fluid or powder, the skin looks kind of melting away and broken. So there's the aging you can see underneath. And, a lot of the skin is kind of, looks very, wrinkled and old and almost melted, if you like. There's times when you see the veins beneath the skin almost look like they're on fire. And there's one witch who has quite a blackened mouth. The teeth are all blackened and gooey. She's also covered in insects. So you see quite a few, centipedes and moths and worms and things like that kind of hanging around her. There's a few other animals in the film as well. You see a cat, but quite often there's these insects, and at times there's the swarms of insects. In fact, people are attacked by these swarms of insects. So, if you don't like sort of beetles and things like that, this might not be for you. There's also one scene when there's quite a few maggots being prepared for a meal. So the other kind of, one other scene which I would put in the violence section is a child is lured into what appears to be a trap. Now, they escape unharmed, but they're lured in by sweets, gummy bears in particular. And there's just that sort of uncomfortable sense of tension as this child is lured towards a waiting adult. The child never sees the adult, there's no interaction, but it just feels a little bit uneasy about what might have happened if this plan had succeeded. You also see a child in a kind of abandoned looking house and dungeon sort of setting, and they look like they've been badly treated. The child actually turns into something else. But again, there's that slight uncomfortable, uneasy feeling that, perhaps this child has been stolen from somewhere and is being kept prisoner or captive by this particular adult. So just be aware of that. In terms of alcohol, you do see some bottles of wine and glasses of wine on a table. You also see people drinking spirits once or twice through the film, but mostly it's these magical potions and powders. So magical powders are kind of blown into people's faces and things like that. Or you'll see people drinking like in a bar kind of setting, but it's a witchy bar, so they're drinking magical potions instead of alcohol, but you kind of get the impression that there's some kind of intoxicant in the glass, I suppose. You also see a woman smoking shisha in one point. She sprinkles some herbs on the shisha pipe as well. So, but that's really it in kind of, in terms of alcohol, and there's certainly no drugs or illegal drugs that are taken in the film. There's no sex in the film, although you do see a woman leaving an apartment. It's implied that she has spent the night, so there's a suggestion there that she has had sex with the man, and then there's a little jokey sequence afterwards where the man in question and a friend kind of joke about his regular visits with aircraft cabin crew. So there's the implication there that he's a bit of a player, I suppose. There's only a little bit of swearing in the film. The F word is used a couple of times as well as the S word, and the word bitch is said once. So The Last Witch Hunter is directed by Breck Eisner and stars Vin Diesel, Elijah Wood and Rose Leslie. And you can read my full breakdown of The Last Witch Hunter at cinemum.net.